Now going back to the first video I did way back, I also showed something I'm going to quickly review here. That was this little incomplete but shader graph. And this was demonstrating how we can link things together. In this case, there would be types that would resolve, and they were nothing until you had patched them together. But then these boxes would take on a type and be fit according to that shape. And because of this, well, there's some shader code that we have in this lower left corner that's getting generated, but at the moment I'm not compiling them into anything. However, this is all demonstrating a principle of how these nodes and boxes all work. So I took what I had there, and there's something I'll show, this little links thing here, and with various kinds of those. I'll show that in a minute. I've been playing around with the same idea. So, but this is not shaders. This is just objects that can connect together, and in the end they'll have behavior that reflects that. I am not currently imposing any sort of type on these links, so you could even link them and link things that form cycles. I don't know if I'll keep that. that would be a way to do looping behavior, but I don't think I'll keep that because of it cuts out that behavior as a possibility that I showed in the shader version. Anyhow, so I needed an object to demonstrate this linkage, so I have a little work in progress editor. So you can adjust these objects. So there's currently only one object, and it's a rectangle, and you can update some of its properties. Some of these don't do anything. I can gray out sections, so I have that. This doesn't do anything. This doesn't do anything. It's just as a test that I can manipulate some of these properties. Some of these do. These do have effects, or at least they do. They? Or did I break these? Huh. I might have broken something here. So when you change a property by moving controls around here, it'll reflect in the text. I think it looks like it looks like I broke that because I have a little proxy that changes to an overlay so that these won't be on top of everything. Well, I need to fix it, but when you change the properties here, it should reflect back on that object over there. Anyhow, so you can change some of these controls, and if you launch, you'll go into a scene. It's not a very exciting scene, but it's a scene with this box. I'll see if I can demonstrate this. If I go to links, I can add in a reference to this rect object. I can use this reference to supply its y value. or its x value. It shouldn't actually be changing. That's a bug. So we can all right. So say we get its x or get its y, we can then set its x. So we want the x that belongs to this object, and we'll get the result from the y and set it. We can set up a dispatch, and we want to listen for a certain event. This is hard-coded right now. It is called, what is it called? In here? No. I haven't touched this in a while, so I'm forgetting. Launched? I think it's launched. Launched isn't turning anything up. Let's see if it's. Oh, it is launched. Okay. So yeah, we want to listen for this. I'll document that somewhere. Now, the question is, will that take effect? So after this launch event fires, it'll follow this next to another action, and in this case, we're going to go to the set action. So our object will be at, say, at this x. All right. See, let's put it down here at this y and over at this x, and it should move it over to the right a little bit when we launch, like so. Okay. So that's an example of how you can string things together to make behaviors. And I think I've implemented most of these. So if else will let you can ask for a Boolean, which will give a yes or no. And if it's yes, you'll do the if condition. If it's else, you'll do this else condition. You can check, say, for instance, these less than operators. So you can compare two numbers. Once only, you can attach an event to it that might get thrown a lot, but only the very first time it's triggered will it do something. So you can use it to initialize, for instance, timers. You can have a repeating or a normal one. These are Solr's timers, basically. So you can supply it a delay of so many milliseconds, or you can hook it up to a number value that returns a delay. And this is the body of the timer, so you can make it do something each time it ticks, like a normal timer, or, oh yeah, so exactly that. You would trigger it with this, so as with the set action. And you can go to the next. This is not when the timer concludes, this is when you fire it off. So right after you fire it off, you can do another thing. I haven't yet added sequences, so you could do multiple things in a row at once. Because I don't think these will let you fan out to don't quote me on that. You shouldn't probably in the end fan out to multiple things, but they might do that now. I still haven't decided on certain things. For instance, if you I'll show this in a minute what I'm talking about. Printing, I don't have it doing anything yet. And these were just mostly for testing. And all of this is provided. I've been trying this. I've been redoing some things I had before. So this is an iteration of some node code that got very, very convoluted. But now I have a lot of these behaviors loaded up in lists. And a typical object would be like this. This is the less than action. And there are some parameters that you would get from say, that editor that I showed before. You would have some of these things being filled in there for the X and the Y. And these will be endpoints that you are hooking together. In the case of the less than, you would be listening for an incoming X value, so you would subscribe to it. And the same thing with the Y. On the other hand, you would be publishing the Boolean result that you give so that others can receive that value. So basically you give it the action that will hook it up. You say what its ID is, and the ID is for the object as a whole. So in the case then less than, it's only one object. It only provides the fact that it returns a value, that it returns true or false. But for instance, with the timers, maybe the timer is not the best example, but something could publish more than one value, for instance. Like if it has an X and Y that you want to export, there's some of that in this file. So this object identifies all of those things, but result is the particular value you're listening for. And here we see what it does. If these have been given something valid, you will then use them and say true or false. If usually, someone might forget to add an X or add a Y coming into this. So in which case, there's really none. What are you going to do? One of them is valid, one of them isn't. So you'll usually want to fall back, and that's false in this case. In other cases, like you might return 0 for a number if there's nothing really you can do. Usually don't want to. I don't think in practice you would just want to let it go, because you might have a whole chain of these things connected, and then there's no. I don't know if there's a proper way to default any of this, because it could be correct most of the time and then fail suddenly. So that's a difficulty with doing it this way, but it might be inevitable. But info.result, I'm checking this because if you're not publishing anything, then there's really no point in doing any of this. So if your object might exist, but you didn't hook it up to anything in the editor, so you'll just make this, you'd make a dead code in that case, because nothing's listening for its result. And so this is pretty typical of something that just returns a value. The things that where you pipe an action, where I was doing that next do connection, that's the same sort of thing. It's implemented a little differently, because whereas a value is sending a value out, and it on the right side, an action is usually the flow of control is going from left to right, but it would be the left-hand side where you trigger this thing, that would be, how do I want to explain this? That would be where you're causing something to happen. So it's actually the value on the left that's asking for that, because it's saying, where do I go next? So you would actually publish that on the left, your left-hand side value. So it's switched around when you're doing an action. And I'm trying to disguise that. So I'm sometimes speaking of left-hand side and right-hand side, but I don't think I've smoothed it over entirely, as long as you still have to get in all the weeds here. Ideally, at some point I'll work out enough of the patterns that I can cover all of this up, but for now, no. And these things also, in addition to all that stuff that's hooking everything up, there's these parts where you, well, there's sometimes you want these in order, so there's some things where that, and sometimes you want a little non-node information like those text boxes I had in some of them. And also sometimes, well, in addition to that, we want, I forget where all of this is located. It's all in here somewhere. Runner, is it runner theme or is it? Well, some of these objects, for instance, the text boxes, you would want a string to be associated with a text box. You might want a Boolean to be a checkbox and all this. So there's some theming kind of going on that you don't really want to specify exactly what you're doing in that file, but you just tell it what type it is, and it should, if it's themed correctly, it'll rig up the right box when you prepare this. So I would just say, for instance, for a text box, introduce object, and what is it? I think somewhere I have somewhere. Oh yeah. So some of these would say what they are, and the theme will look at that and choose what kind of widget to attach to it. That kind of thing should be going on. What else have I got? I have, so I'll revisit the links. I was testing this in a certain way where I was, what was I doing? I was putting, I don't know how much do I have. No, I don't know if I want to show all the stuff that's flooding the console, but there are some ways of describing relationships too. So you can, like you saw there, where I had a. Okay, there I'm showing that I can take a value that I'm exporting and then hook it up to two inputs. So both of these will ask for this value. I can, oh, no wonder. Okay. You saw that those two values weren't being accepted, and that's because this was expecting a uint. A uint is a uint, as you might expect, which is an unsigned int. But a signed int is not an unsigned int. The other way around, on the other hand, an unsigned int is a signed int. So that will get. you can do that. And I have that an int is a number, or an unsigned int is a number is a number. See if I do that, it steals the this the spot that this guy had been taking, so I can flip it around like that. So that's an example of what I mentioned earlier, where you can have it so only one link is assigned to the slot. At the moment, it's either one link or unlimited, and there are some defaults that are built in, but I think if you usually only want an incoming, you usually want one incoming value, but you can fan out to as many as you want, and then there's something that makes sense for actions. Like, I don't know if they're proper, they're really the way they should be at the moment, but so for instance, this would let you after this you would do fire. Ditto, the same thing with this. After this you would do fire. Here, fire would be drawing from these two sources, or is that how I want? I'm trying to think of that. Well, okay, so that's the same exact thing. I don't know why I was thinking that was different, but in this case, you would have next going to two different. You would have next triggering two things. I don't know if I want to keep that. That might be a case where I would want a kind of a sequence thing. Special control item that would do a sequence, because this can get really messy, and maybe it's more appropriate to be specific, but none of this is out of your control. They're just the defaults. So you could be taking in multiple values, and instead of usually you would just say, okay, I want this value and I'll use it immediately. But you might be trying to gather several together. For instance, if it was a math operation and you want to do a fold on it, you could take in a whole bunch of them and do them all together. But it's just you'd have to do some special behavior for that. There were some other things where I wanted to have a little text box you could enter to combine to enter some sort of text string that you would use to combine all of these. I think, yeah, I do have it where it'll print out how all the connections were formed, but it's probably not terribly interesting. And in something I had before, but I haven't added yet, would be where, say, this box would have a little control on top, like a plus and minus symbols. You could use the plus to add more and more nodes that would follow some kind of template. So you could have, this would be you would tell it what kind of thing it was, if it was a number or so on, and basically you'd make instances of it, and it could either be that the order that they're in matters, so you could assign an array of numbers. The first one would be first, second in the array, and so on, and you can rearrange them. Or you could have a text box per item, and it would be the name you would assign to this. So you could, for instance, that would be how you might populate a table or a transition or something like that, where you would say the keys that you want to affect, and you hook them up to numbers. I didn't, at the time, I don't think I had where you could add non-node values when I was redoing this, so I haven't added it in for that reason, but it should be coming. It's been implemented in the past, and it's quite a mess to add all the plumbing for it though, because one of the reasons that I'm revamping this is that, for one thing, I want to add undo and redo, and that's already a mess when you can delete these at random and it'll break whole chains of objects, and then you want to reform it when you redo. So I haven't quite figured out what I need to keep on hand, because if I just try to recreate all the objects, then all the Lua references have been broken, and when I try to make the objects again, they'll probably have different memory addresses and everything, so the identities will all be broken. It's either that or hide them, just don't show them. But then I have to maintain a whole shadow structure of what is and isn't available. So probably what I'll do is I'll probably err on that side and use indices in place of actual references when I'm tracking things, but it's going to be a lot of effort. I do have in the version I did before, I was able to save and load, so that's implemented. That for these instantiable nodes, that requires, that's trouble, because when I start up the name generation thing, the counter resets unless you can record it, but you have to keep that in sync. So the ways to generate new names, you don't want it to stomp on the old ones, so you have to either rebase them or keep track of the counter. And there's all this little bookkeeping that needs. It's a lot to keep track of, and it's just not there. But it should come in time. Another thing, that this is all in one screen right now, but also in the old thing, I had where you could drag on the background and it would move the links back and forth, and I'll probably do that back in the main with this object. I'll add another object too, but that just needs doing. Probably zooming in and out would be handy as well. That's step one. Anyhow, I think that about covers what I've done with this and what's still coming up. So I'll leave that there, and I have one last video to record, which I'll commence in a moment.